Hey there guys, so we're taking a look at Darktide running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now we've taken a look at this game before, but it was just with 8 gigabytes of RAM. This time we're taking a look at it with 16. And this time around we are actually able to get some pretty playable levels of performance, though we did have to compromise a good bit just to be able to get this. And this is running at the stock 15 watt TDP. But of course what we're doing here is of course running the game at the lowest in-game graphics settings. That's a given. But we're also running this at 900p with FSR 1.0 running at the performance preset, which means that visually speaking, this looks really rough. And especially for a game as dark as this, it's pretty much impossible to see any enemies that are far away from the screen. Now, of course, we're running this at these specific settings, and we're still getting some pretty abysmal 1% lows, even though our averages are pretty rock solid right now. Now, of course, it being the stock 15 watt TDP means that we could potentially squeeze out a bit more performance out of this, but again, visually speaking, this is very brutal. Now, the reason we're running this at 900p is that the game just does not let me go any lower than 900p, even though in the menu when you actually launch the game, it gives you an option to set resolutions. You can go down extremely low. When you actually set anything lower than 900p, it just will automatically switch it to 900p, and that's about the extent that you can go. Now, I've also tried changing the default resolution of Windows down to 720p, but when I launch the game, it just automatically takes control and goes to 900p anyway. I'm not sure if I had a 720p display, if it would actually make a difference, but as it stands, it is very brutal to try to play at this resolution anyway, so I feel like a drop down to 720p would make this a completely blurry mess that would be the furthest thing away from playable. Of course, raising the TDP up to 25 watts actually does do a bit to alleviate the problems in terms of performance that we were having for at least a little while there. Though we're still looking at 1% lows that are below a rate that you would want it to be, we are at least now above a 20 FPS experience for the 1% lows, but it's not an amazing result. And again, visually speaking, we are taking such a huge hit that it just does not look like a great experience. Realistically speaking, I would not play the game like this. I really wish that I could have just set this to around 634p or anything like that and just run it natively without FSR on top of it, because FSR with these settings does introduce a lot of ghosting and just artifacts at the edges of pretty much anything that's moving. But unfortunately, again, the game just does not let me go down to that at all. I'm not sure if I could just adjust some INI files or anything like that to actually get the result. I'll have to look into that, but as it stands right now, this is about as good as it's realistically going to get. If I switch over to 1080p full resolution with FSR still set to performance mode, just so you can see what the full native resolution is like, you'll see just how bad of an experience it can really be. And as you can see, while visually speaking, it does look at least clearer than 900p would, as you would expect, the performance is just a travesty where we're not even getting a 30 FPS average, and our 1% lows are trying very hard to just get into the teens instead of single digits. And just in general, our frame times are really abysmal. It is just not a pleasant experience to play like this, so obviously native resolution is out of the question even with something like FSR. 900p is the only way to even really remotely get close to a good result. Of course, if 720p would work on this, might be able to actually get closer to a 60 FPS gaming experience, but it would be more of a academic reason to do it more than anything else, because realistically speaking, I don't think most people would want to play the game like this. It just overall did not feel great to play really most of the time, and the biggest downside was just the visual quality taking such a massive hit. So if you're really desperate to play this game, you can do it at 900p with FSR 1.0 set to performance mode, but just understand that you are getting yourself into a pretty brutal experience visually speaking. Of course, if you're playing with the built-in display of your laptop, it'll look a little bit better. I had it hooked up to both just the built-in display, and I also tried it out with a monitor just to see what the visual quality would be like, just to be able to notice the actual flaws more easily, and they are very apparent on both. But it was at least a little bit more passable with the smaller and a little bit dimmer display of the laptop. That being said, with such a dark game, it does does make it pretty difficult to see enemies in a lot of situations. They kind of just turn into blurry blobs. It's harder to identify different types of enemies. And with a game like this, when you're playing at the higher levels, being able to quickly identify enemies and take them out based off of your specific role is really important. So if you're looking to play this casually, you might be able to do it. But if you're trying to be a little bit more competitive, a little bit more advanced here, you're not really going to be able to comfortably do it on here. But anyways, I hope you guys found this video useful or interesting. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.